Once our character is in the game engine, the programmers and designers need a way to actually move this character around in 3D space. When an animator animates the motion of running or walking, they don't actually animate them moving around too much, so they don't actually travel that far in 3D space as they would in a game. And in order to achieve that kind of movement, the programmers or designers like to take certain elements of the rig or a specific position to identify exactly where the character is in 3D space. So they can take that position and translate that in the engine so that we're getting more of a global translation for the character's movement. This can be done in a number of ways, but for our purposes, we're going to be using a technique called root motion. And all that involves is one extra joint sitting here at the center of the grid. This will be the point that the programmers or designers use to locate the character in 3D space and move them around. And it's very easy to implement. Basically what we have set up now is a system that doesn't use root motion. So to add root motion to the system, it's a very simple process. So we're going to do that really quick right now before we get into parenting all these controllers. So I'm going to go up to the rigging tab right here, and I'm going to click on the create joints tool. Next, I'm going to zoom into the grid here, and I'm going to hold down the X key so I know I'm snapping to the grid. And I'm going to click right on the center. So we've created our root joint now. So we'll go to the channel box editor and we'll name this root joint. Now to make this joint part of our skeleton, we can parent it to our previous root joint, which was actually this center joint here. And we can do that by clicking on our new root joint and then shift clicking on our center joint here and pressing the P key. Now our new root joint is parented to the skeleton, but it's not actually the root joint yet. We still have to take one extra step. So with the root joint selected, you want to make sure you're in the rigging tool set, and you want to go to skeleton and reroute skeleton and click that. What that does is it makes the root of our entire skeleton the root joint, and then the center joint will follow that in the hierarchy. So now if you click on the root joint, you've selected the entire skeleton. A quicker way to do that, I'm going to undo until we've undone that parent that I did. So now the root joint is again separated from the skeleton. Now to reroute the skeleton with one less step, you can take the entire skeleton here in the outliner and middle mouse and drag and place it underneath the root joint. That will do essentially the same thing where the joints are now moved around in the hierarchy so that our root joint is now the parent of all the joints. And that just saves one extra step, but you can do it either way. Now that we have our root motion root joint set up at the center of the grid down there, we're ready to start taking care of all these controllers that we have. To get this character moving properly, we actually have to set up the relationships between all the controllers that we have on the rig. So for example, if we tried to have this character looking upward, we'd want to rotate this neck controller, but if we do so with the setup we have now, we're not able to move any of the following joints that are the child of this neck joint. And that's because each of these joints is being controlled by their own controller's position. So in order to get this to work properly, we need to set up a similar hierarchy relationship with our controllers as the joints have. So just to get started here, we want to make sure that this head is going to be following the neck. So we want to first select the child object, which is going to be the head, and then shift select the neck, which will be our parent, and press the P key to physically parent these two together. So now when we select the neck, we're also selecting its child, which will be the head. And now if we rotate it, we get those two to move together, and then we can also rotate the head, and that will move independently. However, there's still another joint that has its own controller parented to it, so we need to make sure that that's part of the hierarchy as well. So I'm going to select the hair controller here, and then shift select the head and press P, and now that will move along with the head controller, and then the hair will move independently. So if we look at the whole system, we get our neck movement controlling the entire head, and so now we can have them looking up. However, there's still a couple more things here that we need to get parented for everything to actually work correctly. So starting with his jaw here, we have a controller attached to the jaw, so right now that wouldn't move if we rotated the neck. So we need to select the jaw, and then shift select the head, because it's going to be dependent on the head's movement, and then we press the P key. And now as the head moves, the jaw will move with it. And there's even more to this. We have this beard here. So to get this beard to work, we essentially want, for example, when you rotate this top controller, for all the following joints and controllers to move with it. So to do that, we need to make this bottom controller the child of this middle controller, and then this middle controller the child of this top parent beard controller, this top one here. So we're going to kind of work backwards. We're going to start with this child controller here, and then we're going to select its parent with Shift and press the P key. And so now we get that movement we expect. And the same thing, we're going to select this child, and then we're going to select this top beard and press P. And now we need to make sure that this is attached to the jaw, so I'm going to select that top one, Shift select the jaw, and press P. And now, with all that, our entire head, including the neck, is going to be moving just as we'd expect. So you can move the head around, the beard will follow. You can move the neck, and the head will follow. So that's looking just exactly the way we want it to work, with all the hierarchy set up. So we want to continue that theme with the rest of the skeleton and the rest of our controllers. So let's just continue right on down the spine here. I'm going to first select the neck controller, and then I'm going to select this chest controller here, because when we move the chest, we want everything above it to follow. And so with those selected, I'll press the P key, and when I select that center controller, we see that the neck is going to be following. And there are a few other controllers here that we want the center to control as well. Everything above the center should be moving along with it. So we can actually just go ahead and select all of these controllers, the pauldron controllers, the clavicle controllers, and we can even select these hand controllers. And then finally, we'll Shift select our center controller here. And what you might notice is with the default colors set, we get all of our children in white, and then we get the final parent in green. So that's an indicator of how that kind of works. You can select as many children as you want, and then your last selection is going to be the parent. So I'll press P, and I'll grab that center controller, and I'll give them a little wiggle, and you can kind of see everything above that center is being controlled properly. There are some instances where you might not want the hands to be controlled by that center controller, so you can always just unparent those if you need, and you can have those moving independently. And that works out for some specific situations. Now moving right on down the chain, I'm going to select our chest controller, and I'm going to Shift select the very next spine down here, press the P key. I'll select that spine again, Shift select the one below it, press P. Select that guy, select the final spine, press P, and now our whole spine is connected to itself. And that works out very nice. So if you want to select that first spine at the bottom and Shift select the following spines, and you can rotate those, and you can see now we get a nice spine bend because of the relationship that those have. And it looks very nice. Now next up we have our center controller here, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to select the child and Shift select the parent, which would be our center controller, and press P. Now you can always grab the center controller and move around the whole top body of this character and rotate it and stuff, and it comes in handy. For the pelvis controller, we actually want to flip this parent relationship so it can move independently of the top body. We don't want this guy pivoting and having the rest of the body following. We want it to just move independently. So to get that attached to the center controller so it moves with it, we want to first select the pelvis controller and then Shift select the center controller and press the P key. And now while it moves with the center, we can still move it alone so he gets that proper hip movement that we would expect.